My teacher, Shaykh Hamza argued in Washington, he actually argued this at the White House and at Brookings Institute, was he said that in logic we're taught to ask questions in a certain order. One of the things that ill-trained minds do is they ask questions in the wrong order, and then this results in the wrong answers. So for instance, he said you should always ask what before why. So for instance, Newsweek has an article that says, why do they hate us? Instead of asking, do they hate us? Because when the Gallup went out and actually polled the Muslims all over the world, they found that they did not hate us. And so by asking why before asking what, we come up with the wrong answers. So I want to look a little bit at Islamophobia in the United States. And you see a lot of cartoons, and cartoons are, let's go back there. Okay. Islamophobia is the irrational fear of Islamist terrorism. Interesting. So what would you call the rational fear of Islamist terrorism? Sanity. So this is framing already Islamophobia is being framed here. So they're telling you what it is. This is not what Islamophobia is, but cartoonists are actually very, very influential, if you haven't noticed, because many people read the funnies and don't read any other part of the newspaper. And I've seen that on many occasions. So Islamophobia, according to WordNet, a source of many people's definitions, Islamophobia is prejudice against Muslims, from the idea of prejudging. Collins English Dictionary, Islamophobia is hatred or fear of Muslims or of their politics or culture. And then CARE, Islamophobia, see I'm using CARE here. Islamophobia refers to unfounded fear of and hostility towards Islam. Because phobia, according to in psychiatric use, phobia is an irrational fear. Because not all fears are irrational. Like I think it's valid to fear a terrorist attack as a possibility for people that are involved in that. But for the average people, you are more likely to get struck by lightning or die from a dog bite in the United States than die from a terrorist attack. So this idea of having this fear of terrorists. I mean, I'm amazed at the airports they say, please report any suspicious behavior. Everybody's suspicious at the airport. I mean, just start looking around. They're all telephoning, oh my God, and because they're going to lose, or they left something. Then you've got people with backpacks that could have bombs in them. It's a type of insanity when you create this environment where people begin to fear other people. Because all of us have a weapon of mass destruction. We drove here in it. There are millions of weapons of mass destruction in the United States, but people aren't driving their cars into places. Some guy did it in Scotland. Out of 6 billion people on the planet, that's not bad. Right? One guy drove, remember that at the airport crises there in the... there is an irrational fear, but if you want to look at the roots of this, and I think earlier, we were talking with Dr. Algar, and he said, we fail to look at the sources of a lot of these things. And I said, like the Crusades, and he said, well, even before that. And I would agree, because I don't know if they still use it anymore, but when I was in school, we had to study a book called Norton's Anthology of Literature. And the first entry in Norton's book is the Song of Roland. So Western literature begins with a song that celebrates the defeat of the Muslims. And this is very interesting. And if you look at when the Pope spoke in Germany, he mentioned Manuel II. Manuel II was an emperor who went around Europe about 50 years before the fall, actually about 30 years before the fall of Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. And he argued that the Christians needed to help him defend Constantinople from this Turkish onslaught. And he failed. But if you think about European identity, Europe has two fundamental identities historically. One of them is a Christian identity, which is a positive identity. But they also have a negative identity, which is that they're not Muslims. And this is very important historically in the Christian consciousness of Europe, is that they really saw the Muslims for centuries as a serious threat to European civilization. So it's important that we remember that the Crusades are a major turning point in European civilization. One, because of a massive influx of Muslim culture into the West. The Rise of Colleges is a good book to read from George Maqdisi. Also, we forget St. Francis Assisi, and the Franciscans have a wonderful narrative in their tradition. St. Francis Assisi is actually, according to the Franciscans, ended the Crusades because he got a papal dispensation to allow crusaders to get their expiation by making a pilgrimage to Assisi in Italy, where he had a monastery. And that's part of their tradition. There's actually a book about St. Francis, The Saint and the Sultan, which narrates that story. It's a wonderful story. Now, if you look in the consciousness of America, 9/11 now has emerged like probably for my father and mother's generation, the turning point for them was Pearl Harbor. And my mother was actually at the University of Berkeley when Pearl Harbor was bombed. This was a turning point. My father was, he's younger than my mother, but my father was 17 at the time. He literally got a dispensation from his mother. He got permission to join the Air Force. And so at 17, he did not finish his last year at high school, but he actually went into the Air Force as a young man from a very, very wealthy family. But that was the type of fervor that event created in the United States, where people literally went just to sign up. So that's important to remember that this, my son, my 17-year-old is an artist, and he's been drawing pictures of buildings on fire since he was about 12. So this is in the consciousness of a generation of Americans now. And all of us, you know, for people that are, I think over 50, they all know where they were when Kennedy was assassinated. For Americans today, they know where, oh, slow down. Whoa. Okay. So there's a lot of forms of media that are now being used. Cartoons, and cartoons again this is a cartoon from the time when the Greeks were fighting the Turks, and Lord Byron actually went to fight with the Greeks. So this was a very popular war for the Romantics to go and fight. There's a wonderful picture of him in a turban, because the Greeks actually lived under Muslim rule for several hundred years. They actually adopted a lot of Greek clothing. Actually comes from Turkey, and the Greeks have worry beads. The Muslims call them vikr beads. The Greeks call them worry beads. I guess they were worrying about the Turks. Here we have Pope Benedict, and for the Catholics, excuse that, because I don't like these type of cartoons. Violence is incompatible with the nature of God and the nature of the soul. Are you calling us violent? We'll show you violence. Right? I mean, wonderful caricatures there. If you look at Jewish cartoons from the Germans, they're very similar. It's really interesting. Jihad, the devil's behind it. Islam, I love this one. Islam, part of America. So that's Barack Obama, the official version. But here's the Muslim how to build a bomb. Right? So this is the Muslims outrage over the Pope's words, over cartoons, over the modern world. Mildly dyspeptic over car bombings, beheadings, dump bodies. So. And then, I love this one, the West. I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to death your right to work. Death, right? Radical Islam, chopping the head off of the. And then here, oh, Nassim, I hear those EU infidel pigs have finally apologized for Danish cartoons. Thank Allah, I was in therapy all week because of those. It really was affecting my productivity as he's killing people. And it's pretty, you know, these things are every day in the United States. People are reading this stuff, outraged by the cartoons, and then books written by non-Muslims. So this is an incredible industry that's emerging. And it's important because people say, oh, who cares, Americans don't read. Well, talk show radio hosts read. And then they, in turn, you know, I used to monitor this stuff. The first book that I bought was in 1994, I think it was called, it's just amazing industry. I'm actually in the Muslim Mafia with you. Are you in there?
No,
I'm a Muslim Mafia Don. According to Muslim Mafia, I'm serious. And you know what their evidence is? I live on a cul-de-sac. And they actually quoted an FBI agent who said Mafia dons prefer to live on cul-de-sacs because it's harder to do drive-bys and it's harder for the FBI to monitor them. And then I found out Dr. Bazan lives on a cul-de-sac, Imam Zayd lives on a cul-de-sac, all these Muslims, Omar from Care lives on a cul-de-sac. I said, well, I have 5 kids, so that's what I was thinking about when, cars drive slower on cul-de-sac. But and then in another book, Islamic Infiltration, I was a stealth jihadist that infiltrated the White House. So another one actually said that I had information because I said in a speech 2 days before September 9th that America has a grave tribulation coming to it. 2 days before. So I had insider information. And this was put into, and I called, my brother's a lawyer, and he said, well, you're a public figure, tough luck. Because we don't have good libel laws in this country. But I want to reinstitute at least dueling. Because when freedom of speech was a law in America, when they wrote the Bill of Rights, right, they had dueling. It wasn't outlawed till the 1830s. So if somebody said something nasty about you, you could actually send your second, like I could send Hatem Bazan, and say, I demand satisfaction. And then I could just go toe-to-toe with them. And we could, duel it out. But now you just say whatever you want, and since Sullivan versus the New York Times, which was a complete liberal, unfortunately, it was a complete liberal disaster because Sullivan was some racist and he was libeled in the New York Times and he sued them, and because it was during Earl Warren's, it was a very liberal court system, they actually said because he was a public figure that they have higher standards, so it's harder to prove libel. So now we have 2 laws in the United States for public figures and private figures. So you can say whatever you want about a public figure, and they have no recourse to law to redress that. But so my wife has protection under the Constitution for being libeled or slandered, but I don't have protection. And it's just not right. But this is what we're dealing with. These people can say whatever they want, and they're here doing what is called swift voting. Now these are the people that are writing books now from within Islam. Noni Darwish, Palestinian, Ibn Warraq, Pakistani, Leaving Islam, Apostate Speak Out, A God Who Hates, Wafa Sultan, Voices Behind the Veil, Why I'm Not a Muslim, Unveiling Islam, Origins of the Quran, showing that it's all made up, Why I Left Jihad, and then Ayan Hirsi, she's the poster child because she's an attractive Ethiopian lady. So they love her. And then why we want to kill you. Yeah, Ethiopians, by the way, I know a secret about them. They kill ugly babies. Did you know that? Because you will never see an ugly Ethiopian. And it's impossible, statistically. So I think they must do something to their ugly babies. Most beautiful people in the world. Why we want to kill you. Look at that guy. I mean, scary. And now we have Muslim reformers. So these are the ones that want to reform Islam from within, right? Inside jihad, Dr. Tofia. The trouble with Islam, they changed its trouble with Islam today. And this is my favorite one. Learn tolerance from Mr. Tolerance. A discussion between Mr. Tolerance and Mr. Bin Laden. I think we should begin stoning women to death for committing adultery in order to show respect to your culture and sensitivity to your religious values. Many thanks, Mr. Tolerance, for having respect for my religious values. You are indeed an amazing infidel. So, sale of anti-Islamic books may not be high, but commentators read these books and amplify the effects. So you have people like Michael Savage.
Is Islam the one religion about which so many in America and the West censor themselves when it comes to talking about or making fun? Is it just fear?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because they're violent, because they threaten us. And
that's just so amazing.
Yeah, but where are the Southern Baptist suicide bombers? Where are the Methodist marketplace massacre types? It's clear that the problem is Islam.
But let me play devil's advocate here.
That's
Barack
your
Obama
usual role.
wants to win hearts and minds in the Middle East, in the Muslim world, which is a good thing. And you know that. As a soldier, we can't kill all Muslims.
We can't kill them all. So we have to win some of them over. That's just an incredible statement.
This quote, and get your thoughts. I don't wear my glasses. The fact that in Mohammedan law, every woman must belong to some man as his absolute property, either as a child, a wife, or a concubine, must delay the final extinction of slavery until the faith of Islam has ceased to be a great power among men. Pretty outrageous stuff.
Yeah.
You didn't say that, though.
I didn't say that, no.
No. Winston Churchill said that.
Yeah, Winston Churchill, as a matter of fact, in a book in the 50s, also made a comparison, like Oriana Fallaci in Italy, but also Winston Churchill, the comparison between Mein Kampf and the Quran. One of the reasons that I'm being prosecuted, I don't remember Winston Churchill, who got a Nobel Prize for this book, really would have been prosecuted. And I have nothing against people, I have nothing against Muslims, but my point is that Islam is a totalitarian ideology that should be compared not so much with other religions, but with other totalitarian ideologies like communism or fascism.
But if we don't stop covering up what Islam is a violent, now we can say religion, but it's not a religion, it's a political system. It's a violent political system bent on the overthrow of the governments of the world and world domination.
Now see, what you have to realize from this is going on constantly. I have watched in my lifetime the 700 Club, I think 5 times. Every single time there was anti-Muslim statements. So I have to assume they must do that all the time. And these people reach large numbers of people. You know, you can say, oh, well, only 20% of Americans hate Muslims. Right? Well, it's actually, the Pew polls are showing it's more in the 47 percentile that have bad opinions about Muslims. But you're dealing with millions of people in a country that is rooted in civil society, and if anything should threaten the stability of that society, because my personal view is after 9/11, my estimation for the American people went up considerably. I really mean this, because I was convinced that there was going to be attacks on mosques, there was going to be costing of Muslim women. I really thought it was going to get very bad. That was my initial feeling. I was overwhelmed by the amount of goodwill that came out of average people. We got, for every one hate call we got to the mosque, we got 100 people saying, we're really troubled by what we're hearing, people making attacks against your religion. Flowers were actually sent to several of the mosques, you know, to say, look, you're part of America. And many, many people came out in real solidarity and support with the American Muslim community, despite the fact that, they thought that Muslims did this horrible thing. And so that, to me, is a testimony to the innate goodness of a lot of people in this society, but also to the fact that many of the ideals of this country that maybe at the founding of the country were not fully realized or even partially realized, that a lot of these have really been imbibed by people. Because Jefferson was a philosopher, and Jefferson wanted to see America as a neutral religious ground, a safe place. And he actually says, for Christians, Jews, Mohammedans, Hindus, and atheists of every stripe. So that was his vision. The vision of the Founding Fathers was to see a pluralistic society. In Ireton's, in the debates, the constitutional debates in North Carolina, they actually debated whether, if they didn't have religious tests, there could be a possibility of a Muslim president. This is 230 years ago. They're debating the idea of a Muslim president. And the debate was won by those who did not want religious tests. And one of the things they argued was, if there ever was a Muslim elected to highest office in this country, it would be one of 2 reasons. It would be because that people found him the best and most virtuous candidate, or because the majority of people had become Muslim. In either case, that is their prerogative. So this was the argument of the Founding Fathers. which is quite extraordinary. So I think it's really important for us not to underestimate the impact. One of the things my father told me in 1940, he saw a cartoon that had a very big impact on me. He was a young boy, and he saw this cartoon in which, in the first frame, it had Hitler saying, "The world is flat." And everybody in the audience says, "That's crazy." And then in the next frame, he's saying, "The world is flat." And then somebody's saying to one of them, "Well, what's the evidence that it's actually round?" And then in the next frame, he says, "The world is flat." And then they say, "You know, he's got a point there." And then in the final frame, he says, "The world is flat," and everybody's saying the world is flat. That one of the things that our marketing masters in this country know is that repetitive messages have an impact. If you keep saying something over and over again, it eventually takes hold in people, which is why you'll find yourself buying crests.
Now, is that because Islam is the first anti-American, anti-Western religion?
The first anti-
Could it be that the American left and liberals like our caller stand up for Islam because it is an anti-American, anti-Western religion? And they identify with it.
And then this is a whole other field, which is really important. 20 million people got that. In the face of evil, 21 hours at Munich, Muslim terrorists, Islam, what the West needs to know, Delta Force. All these have Muslim terrorists among us. The Siege, Aladdin, right? Because Aladdin, in there he says, you know, in my place, if they don't like your face, they cut off your nose. It's barbaric, I know, but it's home. And then he's got a scene where Aladdin steals an apple and the guy's going to cut his hand off. So it's an association, little children associating with the, I just put that in, I didn't like the Lion King. Now this is another amazing, because see, now these terms like taqiyya is a rarefied term in Islamic law that most Muslims don't even know. And this is something in the Shia tradition, it's more emphasized, but it is also permissible in the Sunni tradition. If you are under threat of death, you can actually deny your Islam. So if somebody's going to kill you, you can say, "I'm not a Muslim." That's called taqiyya. But they're arguing, no, when Hamza Yusuf comes and tells you Islam is a peaceful religion, he's practicing taqiyya because he's a stealth jihadist. And he doesn't really believe any of this. You see, so it's very insidious, the way that they're using these terms. And then, you know, Obama said, "Move America." But these are very, and one of the interesting things about some of these, you'll find ties with the armaments lobby is funding some of these. It's very interesting. Raytheon, you know, General Electric, we bring good things to death. Right? And then conservative dialyses, removing liberal waste from the American bloodstream. Great. From hate to love, right? So Islam, religion of hate, and we're moving into Christianity, the religion of love. Because Muslims, we don't love our wives or our husbands or our children. No. And this is, I think, one of the worst, because it's all from original sources. And one thing I'll say about original sources, and this is a problem, pre-modern texts. I can take St. Thomas Aquinas, which I've read enough Aquinas to know, that, and Sister Marianne did her PhD on Aquinas, so I think we can ask a Christian advice on this also. But I could take Aquinas and make Christianity look like a completely insane religion by just quoting him in certain environments. I mean, Aquinas argues for apostate laws, capital offense. You could do all this. And Aquinas is an incredible, brilliant ethicist, spiritual master. I mean, so many things. But I can take the pre-modern tradition from the Jewish tradition, the Talmud, that a 6-year-old child, and I asked the chief rabbi of Israel, one of them, because they all debate who's the chief rabbi, but I asked one of the chief rabbis of Israel about this, because we were talking about Aisha and marriage laws. In the Talmud, 6 years old, a marriage can be consummated with a 6-year-old. You can take any pre-modern religion and with the modern sensitivities, you can show it to be a completely insane tradition. Really. I mean, we can do this with Christianity, with Judaism, with Islam, any of these religions. But how has the normative practice over time defined itself? This is what is not being told. So it's taking these things, and if you notice, this is more from the right within Christianity. The Jewish tradition, to be fair to the Jewish tradition, I have seen very little from the Jewish community about this, because if you live in glass houses, don't throw stones. What you can do with the Islamic pre-modern tradition, you can do with the Jewish tradition as well. And so that's an important aspect of this. The Gates of Vienna, God Save the USA, The Real Story, Jihad Watch, again, I mean, and these are really well done, a lot of them. They're very well funded. On and on and on. So when you do searches, you'll often come up with these websites. I'm going to pass through this one. People probably saw this. And then unfortunately, and this is the ugly truth, because I want to be fair. We have nutcases. We have 1.3 billion Muslims. You will always have a percentage of people in any religious tradition that are insane. It's just statistic, because you have insane people here. Like, for instance, people talk about, oh, look how bloody Pakistan is, that like they killed 10 people yesterday. 20 people were probably murdered in the United States yesterday. Violence is a human problem. When it's done in the name of religion, it's particularly odious. But people are violent. We've got a problem. Religion, the major problem with religion is that you can get normally good people to do really evil things, as has been pointed out. And I have argued that in some ways, the metaphor that I like to use is in some ways, religion, a metaphor for religion could be atomic energy. Atomic energy is a relatively clean energy, but it has toxic waste. And that toxic waste can be very, very harmful, as we're finding out from Japan. If religion historically has had ways to mitigate that, and it hasn't always been successful, but we do have a problem. And this poor British lady, first of all, nobody can say in Islam. I mean, I studied theology. It's one of the areas that I spent a lot of time on. I studied with really great teachers. It is prohibited in Islam to say anybody's going to hell. The Quran talks about going to hell and condemns certain people to hell. That's true. But I cannot point to anybody and say you're going to hell. It's not our prerogative to do that. And so, this is just a lot of ignorance. This man was wonderful for the tabloids, because he actually had a hook as a hand and an eye patch, and used to go on about jihad and Sharia for the UK. I mean, if you ask these people what is Sharia, they couldn't define it. I guarantee you, they could not. None of them are scholars. They're just, these are slogans. Great, thanks. With friends like that, who needs enemies, right? Behead those who say Islam is violent. I mean, some Muslims would say this guy must be an agent provocateur, but unfortunately, British soldiers burn in hell. Massacre those who insult Islam. Islam will dominate the world. And then we've got, these poor people here. You will eat your babies. God is your enemy. God hates America. Now, I just want to look a little bit in the past. Does anybody know where the Ku Klux Klan got their fashion design from?
Morocco?
No. Does anybody know? Seriously, do you know where? From the Inquisition. This is the Spanish Inquisition. And that is exactly where they got them from. This is one of the early terrorist organizations in the United States. And they were Christian in their understanding. And they modeled themselves after the Inquisitors in Spain. And so there's a lot of transference of racism against blacks and Jews and other communities now onto the Muslim community, because Muslims, by and large, in the United States are brown. They're people of color. And So there is a lot of it. And in fact, you know, if you join Islam, you will join an oppressed minority and learn how it feels to be African American, or I know a white lady in Canada who became Muslim, put on a hijab, and she said, I really felt firsthand that I got to know what it was like to be in an oppressed minority. Because she said, I didn't realize that I had this white, you know, my Mexican wife's nodding her head, yeah, about time. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The demonization of Native Americans, right? I mean, there it is, right? And we don't show what we did to them, right, in this country. But this was, and that's what it leads to, Wounded Knee, where unarmed Native, this was the last really battle in the American Indian Wars, unless you include the AIM battles, the later ones like Alcatraz and things like that. But this is, I like this, Homeland Security. This was the original Homeland Security, fighting terrorism since 1492. Right? Demonization of African Americans. This is something that our culture was very good at also. Wonderful. She tried to commit suicide, that poor girl. I mean, if people read her history, Elizabeth Eklund, I think her name was. But, you know, death to all race mixers. There's a hidden genocide in this country that nobody talks about. In the South, whole black populations after the Civil War disappeared in counties, literally disappeared, because they just killed them all. And this has been documented by historians in this country. So we have a very dark history. We forget apartheid. When I was born, there was still apartheid in this country. So it wasn't that long ago. You know, and people struggled to get these rights. Many of them Jewish Americans. A lot of these people that were in the early civil rights movement were out of the Jewish community because they understood. They sided with them. And there's a wonderful book called When the Irish Became White, because the Irish Catholics were, I'm going to get to that in a second. So the evil Chinese, right? Same thing. Dr. Fu Manchu, exclusion laws. There were exclusion laws in this country excluding Chinese immigration. And we forget also the pogroms of the Chinese that happened. Even in San Francisco, we have a horrible history of brutal attacks on the Chinese community. Right? World dictatorship. Sound familiar? Right? Cruel, insidious, treacherous Dr. Fu Manchu. Now it's Dr. Abdullah in his ruthless, mad scheme to rule the world. So, and this is one of the evil Japanese. Also, we forget the demonization of the Japanese community. Japs keep on moving. White man's neighborhood. This is your enemy. Again, and then this is what it ended up in, right? So Japanese Americans were interned in California. We forget. Because a lot of the best farming property in Santa Cruz, Monterey, Southern California were owned by Japanese. So there was a move to get Japanese Americans interned here, confiscated their land. It didn't happen in the Midwest. Japanese fought. They were actually interpreters, and many of them were decorated soldiers. It's still there, too. You can go out there and see this. And by the way, this has never been overturned constitutionally, internment of a collective group of people in the United States. It has to actually happen again for it to go to the Supreme Court. But there was an official apology in the 70s, but it has never been deemed unconstitutional. And FEMA has actually, they have internment camps. This is one of the 25 most censored stories. Sonoma State, the School of Journalism, has shown that there are actually internment camps if there was ever, quote-unquote, illegal immigrants becoming rebellious, so that they actually have camps to intern them. We serve whites, no Spanish or Mexicans, right? This, for some people, Mexican, this is called Aztlan. You know, Texas was stolen from Mexico. I mean, I said to my wife once, "You guys are taking over." She said, "No, we're not. We're taking back." So the demonization of Jews, I mean, hadith wala haraj, like the Arabs say whatever you want. So look, they look just like Arabs too. That's what's so interesting, you know, is that the cartoons of the Jews look very similar. But this all has impact on people. There's the Jew plodding away in his ghetto, and this is how the Anti-Defamation League and other organizations were started, because of the lynching of a Jewish man. And then obviously the Jewish financiers controlling the world. The Jews are terrorists and subversive. 1907 USSR. Demonization of Irish Americans. This is my favorite one, because my family suffered from this. Any color or country except Irish. Like, help wanted, no Irish need apply. None of that. I mean, this is, and then look, they're African American, Jewish, and the Irish guy. So they were all equal opportunity prejudice. They were seen as drunkards. They were actually, like African Americans, shown to be ape-like. And then this is what it resulted in, the Kensington riots. This happened in Philadelphia in the 1840s. There was a rumor spread that the Irish were going to get the Catholic Bible to replace the Protestant Bibles in the public schools. And the Protestants saw this as kind of atheism. And so they went and they burnt 2 huge cathedrals that were built by the Irish Americans. My great-great-grandfather, Michael O. Hansen, was in Philadelphia at this time. He migrated to Philadelphia in 1838. So he was there for these riots. And scores of Irish were killed. It actually changed the consciousness in this country, because people became ashamed afterwards. But the Irish were bribed into enfranchisement. Daniel O'Connell, the great Irish orator, asked the Irish Catholics to stand by the African Americans in their fight for liberty in this country. And unfortunately, and I would be much prouder of my heritage had they done the right thing, but they didn't. They went into the political process, and they actually sided with the oppressor in that case. Here's citizenship. There's the Irish, just like now the Muslim is the guy that can't assimilate. And he's got his knife because the Irish are violent. Anyway, the final thing is just about models of possibility. I think it's important to remember that in this country, that people have overcome immense difficulties. And, these are the great chiefs meeting at the White House with Coolidge. Now we have many, many great Native Americans that are recognized by the dominant community. The African American model is also an extraordinary model, but it was done with a lot of hard work and effort. You do not get enfranchisement in this country easily. It's never been given to any group of people outside of the Anglo-Saxons that came to these shores. It's never been given to any group of people without a struggle. And that is part of the history of this country. And it's possible. So I think the Muslims now, the Chinese also were capable of doing this. The Muslims, food is one of the things. Look, now they're learning Tai Chi. They used to be shooting people. Acupuncture. We've got governors now from the Chinese community. Japanese also have, the Mexicans also, and please, the Irish, I mean, two presidents. The first Irish president, though, was Andrew Jackson. People don't know that. But he was an Ulster Irish. He was Protestant. And that wasn't, you weren't considered Irish. You had to be Irish Catholic to be an Irish. So Kennedy's considered the first. The Mexican, please excuse the next slide. Oh, not Hugo. He's, Chavez is good with this guy here. It was an embarrassment, but hey, he made it. The Jewish model is an extraordinary model. My point is, now you can just look at the vote, the Jewish vote, and how much it impacts politics in this country. So the Muslims have possibilities, but the Muslim community has to fight. And I don't mean like, violence. Just in Chinese, there's a debate about this, but the ideogram for crisis is also the ideogram for opportunity. In any crisis, there's always immense opportunities. The Muslims have an opportunity to educate people. There are people genuinely interested in Islam. Unfortunately, if you go to a bookstore today, if you go to the Wicca section, How I Embraced the Moon Goddess and Found Inner Peace, you go to Satanism, How I Came to Know Satan and Found Inner Peace. I mean, it's just amazing. Every religion, but you go to the Muslim section, Why I'm Not a Muslim, The Trouble with Islam. leaving Islam. It's just amazing that the people who hate Islam are defining Islam. And that's why the Muslim voices really are absolutely essential. But I would also challenge those people, good people like Sister Marianne Farina. She always gets embarrassed, but I love that woman because she, to me, represents the best of the Christian tradition. She is somebody that takes very serious. And I know she doesn't view Muslims as enemies, but she takes very serious things like turn the other cheek and love thy enemy. These are very difficult things to do, but the real Christians have to step up to the plate. The real Jews have to step up to the plate. People that recognize that an attack on any religion is an attack on all religions. That is just the simple fact of the matter, because at the essence of religion is a commitment to something that transcends the self. All religious people that are part of this incredible tapestry of religions that we have in the world are people that are saying there is more to life than just this physical world that we're into. We share immense commonalities in our ethics. Islamic ethics, as Sister Marianne knows, is identical to Christian ethics in so many areas. Virtue ethics of Ghazali is the virtue ethics of Aquinas. These are the commonalities and the bridges that don't need to be built. They need to be pointed out. Everybody talks about building bridges. There are so many bridges that are already there. We just need to recognize them through the fog and then make that effort to cross them and meet somewhere in the middle and just enjoy the incredible view. I was once with a group of Muslims, my wife was with us, Uzma Husseini and some other people, and we were walking across a bridge just after 9/11. It was a very narrow bridge, and there were some two people coming on to the bridge, and we got to the middle, and I just made a joke, this bridge isn't big enough for the both of us. And he looked and he said, you're Muslims, aren't you? And I said, yes. And he said, the bridge is big enough for all of us. We're very disturbed at what's being done to your community. There are people out there that need to be reached. The Muslims need to reach out. But we also need to hear from those people. Thank you very much. I have a flat.